Chosen one, step up, beloved. You didn't just stumble into this moment. You were summoned. You've been through too much, cried too many silent tears, and carried too many battles in secret for this to be random. You are not ordinary. You are not overlooked. You are the proof that what is meant for you cannot be stolen, delayed, or destroyed, no matter who tried. So take a deep breath. Straighten your crown. You are not here to blend in. You're here to stand out. You are the storm they didn't see coming, the miracle they can't explain, and the evidence that heaven keeps its promises. Welcome to your stage, chosen ones. This is your season to rise, boldly, unapologetically, and undeniably. What once sounded like laughter behind closed doors has turned into a hush that no one can explain. They underestimated what silence was hiding, not bitterness, but proof stitched into every moment you endured quietly. And now the same streets that once swallowed your story whole are forced to retell it, louder, unable to ignore the weight of what they tried to bury. Looking for purpose and peace? Hit subscribe and start the journey. The places where they plotted feel different now. Rooms they thought were safe are full of whispers that name them as architects of their own downfall. Every message, every little scheme leaves fingerprints that no amount of pretending can erase. What follows now isn't trivial. It's a revelation dressed as a reckoning. The air feels charged, like something bigger has arrived to level everything that was tilted against you. It's not paranoia. It's a shift no one can control, echoing like a verdict carried on the wind. No doors remain locked when truth decides to walk through. This isn't just gossip. It's a turning point, delivered both in sight and in spirit. Your name has begun to rise in the same corridors where it was once dragged. That irony, sharp and unrelenting, rattles them more than any victory march. Once, you were nothing more than a convenient story for them to tear apart, an afterthought, dismissed and doubted. They never imagined they'd hear your name spoken with reverence, where they once spat it out in ridicule. But now, without asking, your name is being passed through circles you've never even visited. People they admire now speak it with respect they can't stomach. Opportunities open as though they'd been waiting for you all along. And the very audience that watched them belittle you is watching you take flight. It's not just that you succeeded. It's that they can't look away. That burns deeper than they'll ever admit. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. Without trying to prove anything, you simply became. You kept your footing when they wanted you to slip. And just by continuing to exist, you revealed every lie they wrapped around your name. Those who called you unstable, unworthy, laughable now find their own obsession exposed, haunting them in every quiet moment. The most unsettling part for them is that you never demanded any of this. You didn't beg for acknowledgement or chase applause. You simply rose. You rebuilt. You walked forward. Now you're being spoken of in spaces their deception could never reach. Yes, your name carries through, but not with venom, with weight, with admiration, with awe. What they try to dismantle has become a monument. What they tried to quiet now draws a crowd. All they can do is watch in silence, their screens glowing in the dark, as something far greater than them lifts you higher. This ending wasn't in their script, but it was written elsewhere, and it's only just begun. Some believe they can wound others and walk away unnoticed, but the stage they built for mockery has become their own spotlight. They watched silently when harm was being done. Some even cheered from the shadows, certain the damage would go unseen. They believed the silence surrounding them was permission, not realizing it was just a calm before their own storm. Now the same eyes that once found amusement in someone else's pain are being forced to witness a mirror turned back on them. The chapter they thought was closed has reemerged as something they can't tear out of the book. Every cruel gesture now circles back, undeniable and public, with no way to rewrite the story they authored. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. They move nervously now, unable to rest, scanning every corner for whispers, fearing every sound carries their own secrets. And that's the most bitter truth. Not a word has to leave your mouth. The universe itself speaks louder than vengeance ever could, and consequences flow in silence where shouting once was. They never imagined that the harm they dealt carried a cost, but it does, and the payment has come due. Some find themselves estranged from those who once stood beside them. Others discover trust dissolving around them like salt in water. The jokes they made at someone else's expense now echo back at them in ways they can't escape. What unsettles them most is how little you care. No retaliation, no accusations, just quiet growth. Yet their guilt clings to them, louder than any accusation ever could. When they dismissed the hurt they caused, they assumed no one noticed. But there's a higher kind of awareness that records what people think is invisible. And the healing you stepped into now acts as a signal flare, revealing everything they tried to keep hidden. It shakes them to realize your survival means something is watching, and the balance they thought they controlled is already shifting beyond their reach. What unfolds now isn't a conclusion, but the start of an unexpected reversal. What they failed to see was that your story itself was a kind of testimony, quietly building into a case stronger than anything they could refute. While they plotted, mocked, and conspired, they believed they were shielded by closed doors and whispered lies. What they couldn't comprehend is that nothing was missed. No slight, no betrayal, no cruel word escaped notice. Every tear shed, every humiliation endured was marked and remembered by a justice they neither respect nor understand. They assumed their words were harmless or private, unaware they were writing their own confession the entire time. Every scheme, every false story, every attempt to undermine became a thread in a larger tapestry now impossible to untangle. And while they were fixated on watching your reaction, they overlooked the fact that their own actions had already delivered the evidence. No cameras, no screens, no witnesses needed. Only a kind of wisdom that sees through veils. You didn't need to argue. You didn't need to defend yourself. Simply standing, enduring, and rising was enough to allow the unseen to finish the rest. And now, finally, the pieces are falling into place, and others are starting to see what was hidden all along. Some carry themselves as though no light will ever find the corners they hide in. But now everything they concealed is surfacing faster than they can cover it. The illusion they clung to is unraveling, thread by thread, and their carefully constructed mask is crumbling in plain view. The narrative they distorted is dissolving under the weight of clarity, and no one is buying the lies anymore. The silence they thought would protect them has betrayed them, leaving them scrambling for explanations they can't even believe themselves. The voice they tried to smother has grown too powerful to ignore, and it speaks without words, cutting through their denials. What unsettles them most is that none of this came from you. The timing belongs to something much larger than revenge, and the proof was always waiting for its moment. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. What's happening now is not just chaos, it is precision. The disturbances they hear, the revelations that keep surfacing, the collapse of what they thought was untouchable. All of it carries the mark of something far beyond human hands. The flashing lights, the investigations, the sudden transparency, that's only the surface. Beyond what can be seen, there's a tribunal already in session. A judgment that predates their schemes and doesn't bother with their excuses. In that space, the conclusion was already reached before they even realized they were standing trial. For too long they mistook stillness for weakness and silence for absence. They thought their actions would remain buried because you did not fight back on their terms. But now their shelter is gone, and what they feared least has arrived, loudly, decisively, and unyielding. Their foundations are breaking in ways that logic can't explain. Their peace has fled. Their alliances crumble in their hands. Secrets leak out of places they thought were sealed. This isn't chance. It is the outcome of a judgment that cannot be resisted. There are unseen witnesses who decided their cruelty had gone on long enough. Forces tasked with ensuring the scales no longer tip in their favor. Advocates they cannot see have been presenting your pain as undeniable evidence, and the case has already closed against them. What they never understood is that the very reason they feel the walls closing in now is because of what they tried to do to you. Not because you demanded a reckoning, but because you refused to answer evil with more of the same. and that restraint became their undoing. What is breaking around them isn't random. It's the inevitable result of what they set in motion against someone they could never overpower. The damage they caused wasn't just to you. It was to the very order that was protecting you all along. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. They sensed something in you they couldn't name, but deeply resented. That's why they struck so hard, not out of confusion, but because they understood your worth even before you did. That quiet resilience, that grace that lingered despite everything, the way you stood unshaken where they expected collapse, it unsettled them. They wanted to erase that light because it reflected their own emptiness too clearly. They didn't target you out of boredom. They moved against you because your very existence made their deceit impossible to hide. Your calm turned their cruelty into noise. Your integrity revealed how shallow their power was, and your refusal to break made their bitterness louder than they could bear. Some can sense greatness before it even recognizes itself, and that awareness turns to fear they can't disguise. Long before you understood what you carried, they detected it and struck with precision, hoping chaos would shake it loose from you. Every insult, every betrayal, every quiet attack was a calculated strike meant to weaken what they couldn't name. They tried to dim what they saw in you before you ever claimed it. If they could fracture your confidence, they thought, they could rewrite your reflection to fit their comfort. They wanted you to believe you were unworthy, fragile, forgettable, anything but extraordinary. But the illusion only held as long as you doubted yourself. The moment you stood taller, the scaffolding of their lies collapsed around them. Once you moved with certainty instead of hesitation, the false picture they painted of you couldn't hold its shape. Even your presence betrayed their schemes. The calm you wore unsettled them more than any retaliation could. The way you kept growing despite the weight of their cruelty made every act against you look sharper under the light. That's why they lashed out, not because you were broken, but because you reminded them of what they could never fabricate. And yet you remain, unshaken, rising. Their strategy unraveled before their eyes, leaving the truth exposed for anyone paying attention. Their attempts to hide what they'd done only drew more attention to their guilt, until it was written plainly for all to see. Their whispers have become their undoing. Every time they spoke your name as a punchline, they wove the very rope that now tightens around their reputation. What they passed off as harmless chatter now echoes as confession, and they don't know how to silence it. In their minds, it was just idle talk, nothing serious. But each word was a seed of their own exposure. What they thought was clever turned out to be clumsy evidence. They forgot that their tongues could turn into testimony against them. Every embellished story, every sarcastic remark, every distorted version of you piled into a ledger they didn't know was being kept. While they laughed behind closed doors, the unseen kept count. While they mocked, something higher was listening. What they intended as a case against you became an airtight case against themselves. And now their stories are unraveling in full view. People are piecing it together, realizing the contradictions, noticing the cracks. The voices that once shouted your flaws with so much certainty have fallen quiet, because now the version of you they tried to sell doesn't align with what everyone sees. And those who shouted the loudest are the ones drawing the most scrutiny now, socially, spiritually, and even beyond. This isn't just some vague notion of karma returning. It's accountability finally catching up. They spoke too freely, revealed too much, and now they've cornered themselves with their own bitterness. Their true intentions and insecurities were visible all along. They just assumed no one was watching closely enough to notice. But now the air hums with a different story. The narrative has shifted. The laughter has stopped. And the script they wrote is being played back, line by line, with them as the punchline. Some only realize what anchored them when the anchor is gone. And now they're watching everything unravel around them. Their fabrications are folding under the weight of reality. And every story they twisted is being untwisted in ways they can't control. The moment you stepped away, It sent ripples they didn't anticipate. They mistook your exit for defeat, believing you'd fade quietly. But what left with you wasn't just a person. It was the stillness that kept everything from collapsing sooner. What they failed to understand is that your presence wasn't ornamental. It was structural. The balance tipped the second you withdrew, and the cracks they'd painted over began to split wide open. You were carrying far more than they ever gave you credit for. And when you stopped holding it, the weight fell squarely where it always belonged on them. You were never just filling space. You were the quiet force keeping chaos at bay. The witness who unknowingly delayed consequences just by standing there. But once you moved on, the cover they depended on was stripped away. What they'd hidden behind curtains started bleeding into daylight. People started noticing gaps they couldn't explain, and the silence became louder than anything they tried to disguise. They wanted you quiet because your silence kept the illusion alive. You were the mirror they could distort as long as you stayed. Someone to scapegoat, someone to manipulate, someone to blame. Without you, that mirage evaporated. No one left to absorb the blame. No one to divert attention. Just themselves, unmasked, and staring into the mess they created. This isn't random. It's the inevitable void left when what was sustaining them disappears. Your departure didn't cut them down. It simply revealed how hollow everything they built really was. You didn't strike back. You didn't slander. You didn't seek revenge. You just left. And that was enough. The truth didn't need you to shout it. It just needed you to stop cushioning their lies. Your absence roared without words. Not because you announced it, but because what you carried couldn't be replaced. And they are now crushed under the ruins of their own illusion. For too long, they gained from what cost you everything. They built an entire persona from the wounds they inflicted. They wore your pain like a costume, performing it for applause. It wasn't only betrayal, it was consumption. They mined your hardships for sympathy, twisted your vulnerability into a narrative that cast them as the hero. They fed the crowd stories about you that you never consented to. They played the victim so convincingly that no one questioned the script they wrote. And for a while, the world clapped for them, believed them, even celebrated them, not knowing the foundation they stood on was borrowed, stolen from your quiet suffering. But now the cracks are loud. Truth doesn't stay buried. Every advantage they gained from that fiction is being reclaimed, and they're feeling every piece of it fall. The alliances are unraveling. The applause has gone quiet. Conversations stall when your name is mentioned, and the ones who once led the chorus against you shrink into silence. People are realizing the loudest complaints didn't come from the one who was wronged. They're seeing how the story bends when the facts finally come out. The ground they built on is collapsing, spiritually and socially. Sleep escapes them. Fear gnaws at them. They're starting to recognize it wasn't just unfortunate. It was unjust. And now they know it. Some thought their applause would drown out accountability. But now the cheers are fading, and the room grows quieter every day. Those who stood in their corner have begun stepping back, their smiles thin, their hands folded. The sympathy has run dry, and in some corners, the weight of justice is finally arriving in ways they never expected. Words once meant to wound have become the evidence of what they truly were. The same marks they left behind, the ones they assumed would disappear, now stand as testimony, undeniable and vivid. Every structure they stacked upon that harm is coming apart, brick by brick, undone by the very hands that once clapped for them. What really catches attention now isn't even the cruelty itself, but how meticulously it was hidden. The cover-up was louder than the harm, and now people can't stop noticing the cracks. They're waking up to the web that held it all in place. Not just one person, but an entire chain of silence and rehearsed gestures, keeping the truth buried. The lies were polished until they gleamed, the denials perfectly timed, the outrage carefully staged. It was never just one wrong act. It was a whole machinery devoted to keeping it quiet. People are finally whispering about the list of names that saw, heard, felt, and chose to look away. That silence was suffocating. It was an agreement no one had to speak aloud, but everyone followed. Keep the image intact. Protect what matters. Don't stir the waters. Now that pact is cracking. The alliances, the pretend loyalty, the friendships built on denial, all breaking like glass under too much weight. It took planning to maintain the lie. It took intention to look you in the eye and dismiss what they knew. They made you question your own senses, dismissed your words, painted you as fragile or dramatic. But it wasn't simply a misunderstanding. It was deliberate, and they thought it would never surface. The truth has no leash anymore. It seeps through everything. The people who once turned a blind eye are starting to see how they were used to. Fed a version of events, shown a manufactured story. Now the ones who laughed at your expense find themselves under the same scrutiny. Every excuse they made, every defense they offered starts to sound like confession. That shame spreads quickly, because everyone who played a part feels it now. It was never just the actions of one. It was all who shielded it, and the shield is gone. What once looked like gossip is actually clarity, finally finding its way into the light. They can't sleep because they know exactly what they did when the moment came, and they know they failed. You weren't just a face passing through. You were the mirror held up to them, the test they didn't recognize at first. They didn't just stumble quietly. They fell with confidence, with mockery, convinced there would be no reckoning. But now their own conscience is louder than anything else. They always sensed something different about you, even if they never said it. It wasn't your silence that unsettled them. It was your grace. The way you stayed steady. The way you didn't return what they gave you, even when you could have. You didn't expose them. You exposed what was inside of them. They chose to destroy what they didn't understand, instead of asking why it unsettled them so much. Now, the silence they wished for is a torment. Every quiet hour stretches like punishment. Every delay feels like the hammer about to fall. They're not afraid because they see something happening. They're afraid because they know something should, and that knowing has turned into a weight they can't set down. Some pretend composure until the sound of truth creeps closer, and now every vibration rattles them. Each unexpected call sharpens their nerves. Every notification stirs suspicion. They can't stop wondering which cracks are finally letting light in, who is speaking up, and how much has already been revealed. The weight in their chest isn't because anyone pointed a finger. It's because their own spirit recognizes what's coming. They judged themselves long ago when they traded kindness for arrogance, and now they're running in circles trying to outpace what they set in motion. This isn't just misfortune catching up. It's the dawning awareness that they had the chance to rise to integrity and chose to sink instead. That revelation stripped away whatever false peace they clung to. What they buried refuses to stay quiet. It's not you pursuing them. It's their own decisions echoing louder than any accusation. When you broke free, it did more than untangle you. It destabilized an entire chain of deception. The ground they thought was solid gave way because you were the thread holding it all together. And once you pulled yourself out, everything else began to cave. They constructed walls to keep you contained, invisible barriers meant to confuse and exhaust you into staying put. But your escape wasn't just a step forward. It was a shattering force that fractured everything they depended on. Your presence had carried a quiet strength they fed from without gratitude. Your kindness softened the blow they deserved. Even your silence shielded them. But they mistook that restraint as weakness and siphoned what they could until it stopped. Some of them gained emotionally from your struggle, others materially, and others still clung to darker patterns designed to keep you powerless. But the moment you walked away, all of it lost its power. Their connections are fraying. Their stability dissolves. The illusion of control they clung to evaporates. What they don't understand is that you weren't just another pawn. You were the keystone. When you moved, the structure they leaned on toppled with you. They're confused now, questioning why nothing they try succeeds, why allies withdraw, why obstacles appear where doors once opened. Deep down, they sense the answer but can't say it aloud. Your liberation marked the beginning of their reckoning. As long as they held you down, they felt untouchable. But now that you're beyond their reach, clear, grounded, and free, they're exposed, stripped of the cover your presence unknowingly gave them. Your escape revealed what they wanted hidden, and this unraveling has only just begun. While they were busy crafting accusations, they neglected their own reflection. Their obsession with tarnishing you blinded them to their own trail of mistakes. They poured their energy into painting you unstable, unreliable, whatever would keep people distracted from the real story. But in doing so, They left behind a tangled web too messy to hide. Now that truth is pressing forward. Every misstep they tried to bury is being traced right back. What felt like clever strategy at the time now looks like carelessness. Lies stacked on lies eventually collapse, and they've already forgotten which ones they told and who they told them to. They underestimated how much others remember. They thought no one would ever bother connecting the dots. But the dots are connecting themselves now, and the picture is forming whether they like it or not.